lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of design, PM expertise, and I think that the topic here is really sort of diving into specifically kind of this tension that we all have, particularly with AI and some of the fast iteration we're seeing with product cycles, between the speed of shipping and going deep in discovery, understanding depth of customer. We had some actually pretty lively discussion backstage around this. But I want to start it off with a sort of a hot topic which came up in our preamble around this, which is discovery dead? And I'll start with Alex here, because he started a company really around this topic, and I think he has a lot of experience with customers. So I'm curious, is discovery dead?
I think the learning happens either way. So if you do the discovery or not, the learning happens. Either you do it before shipping, or you do it after shipping, and you learn from the customers using your product, not using your product, not generating any revenue. So I think the interesting question is, how much discovery do you want to do before shipping, and how much do you do after shipping? So there's kind of a continuum where you can do a lot of discovery before, or no discovery. And I guess the idea is you have to find a sweet spot. You have to do the right amount of discovery before shipping to get like a general direction of where you want to go, make sure you're not like completely missing the project, but also not too much to spend too much time on it and avoid shipping too late. So that's my take on it.
Lacey?
Hi there, I'm Lacey. I mean, hard no, but here's why. So, in fairness, I mean, I started my career as a researcher, a researcher and designer, so I'm going to value this more. But my belief is, if discovery was dead, all of you, every company you work for, would just be freaking crushing it all the time. Like every KPI, everything you want to be doing would be met, because we have this power over all of our end users, our buyers, to get them to do what we want them to do. And that isn't what's happening, right? And so while we're in an age where we can ship things quicker, we can get things out there, like delivery is not always the moat that it used to be, right? We can get things into production. It doesn't mean they're performing, right? And we don't always know why. We aren't linking, like, how can we influence and change this behavior to get to those end outcomes? And so in most cases, I would say no, like we need more discovery. I'm actually very optimistic about the future of all of us folks in this room, because we have to unravel the messiness of humans and why they're doing what they're doing and not doing what we want them to be doing. But on the other side of that, I will say, similar to what you were sharing, Alex, like it doesn't mean all discovery is good, right? Like it doesn't mean we need to thoroughly analyze everything before we can make a decision or say go. And so if you in the past have been doing a lot more, I don't know how to say this politely, but like low value research or something that's really formulaic or isn't creating end outcomes, that is dead. And it should be dead. It should have been dead before. But long term, I'm very optimistic about discovery and its future.
Okay. Jess, you've had a distinguished career at a couple PLG businesses. We all know Box and Slack. You're now at Webflow. Quick iteration there, probably a lot less discovery. Like, how do you think about whether discovery is dead or not?
Yeah, I think the notion of discovery as a phase that has a start and an end is dead. I think that is just a completely broken model, and I think much more about always-on discovery that is powered by our intuition, our deep relationships with our customers and our users, sometimes going out and doing more formal research and discovery, and sometimes testing, using AI tooling. It has to be an always-on motion. It can't be one phase that is then handed off. I think that is a big, big mistake that I see of people just saying, you know, I did the research, here it is, it's gonna go in the binder, on the shelf, thank you so much, I'll see you for the next study. That doesn't work anymore. We need to have a continuous relationship with our customers where we're iterating and deciding what worked, what didn't, what in prior research do we actually bring into this new area of discovery we're looking at, and how do we create a situation where we feel accountable to our users to understanding them. Like discovery with a capital D, I'm just not sure it's that. It's really like a deep, intimate understanding of what we're doing and what we're building.
Yep. And Patrick, you've been at really large companies. At Atlassian, you founded several companies. How do you think about this from a large standpoint, whether it's Atlassian or startup, you know, or in between, where you end up at Amplitude, they went public? How does that look for you?
So I've worked in many organizations. I actually started my career as a user researcher and designer as well. And the way that I always think about this is very similar. It's more of continuous discovery versus more of a centralized discovery organization that's working on projects that don't necessarily impact the customer. And what I always talk about is that good decision making is the intersection of qual data, quant data, and intuition. And the more you talk to your customer, the better your intuition becomes, which means the quicker you can make accurate decisions on the fly. And I think the more senior you get, the better and more reliant you become on that intuition, this like default sense that you get. I'd say like research in of itself doesn't necessarily absolve you from the responsibility of the decisions that you make. Research actually helps you make better decisions. So if you have high confidence on your decision making, you can rely a little bit less on research, and that's where intuition and gut come in. I'd say the thing that I've observed across organizations, I worked at EMC, which is a 60,000 person organization, which just was very sales led. They shipped whatever the sales organization wanted because they had a very direct line of sight for the customer. And I worked at PLG companies like Atlassian, where we were actually building products for ourselves. So it was a lot easier. We had a more innate sense of what we needed to do. And we measured a lot of the work that we did on the back end using quantitative data. We had research as a centralized org there, but it was mostly building artifacts that we can then use to inform future bets, primarily on new product areas and surface areas. And it was hard to kind of measure the impact of that long term. And so I think the best thing was when we actually try to get our engineers, our PMs, our designers in front of customers so that they can make better decisions and they can actually improve the gut biome that they had. And so I think research is not dead. I think it's just the way that it has evolved over time is a lot more continuous than project-based.
Okay, so we all agree research is here to stay. Discovery is important. I think, Alex, you have founded a company that's based on this principle. You work with startups, but you also work with large companies. How do you think about scaling discovery beyond research? And how do you elevate kind of research's position and design, elevate their work and have bigger impact within organizations? Or how do you see that being done within your clients?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we work with smaller companies, work with enterprises, and usually there's a research team, and the ratio of researchers to designers, product managers is like 1:20, 1:50 in some cases. So the question is always, how can we bring research into the organization better? And really the organizations that we work with that do that best, they usually have like one superstar in their team, a research ops person, a UX manager, whoever it is, who is super enthusiastic about research, brings into the company, builds up the foundation, builds up the tooling, the processes, the templates, and finds the people internally who are also enthusiastic and want to join. That might be an engineer, might be a product manager, might be someone from marketing, whoever it is, and then this can like set something in motion. And this is usually where we see like things starting. It can be really one person who can set this in motion. It's super interesting to see. And then there's companies like have been existing for decades, even 100 years or more, old school engineering companies who like really managed to implement research in a user-centric philosophy in the entire organization. And this is really amazing to see. And this is also what brings us so much motivation with Condens to help them, support them with software and help them bring research into the organization.
Yeah. And Lacey, I'm curious for you, given your company, you built a company around this. Big companies bring you in to actually help you define this project. When you do that work, how do you kind of hand it off so that it take off on a life of its own and really grow within the organization?
Yeah, you've got it. This is like the age-old question, and I will say most companies really struggle with how do these cross-functional teams collaborate, how do you make sure that the work you're doing lives and breathes on to other parts of the org. And as you shared with Zoco, we're embedding researchers and designers across dozens of teams every year. And so we get to see, like, uniquely, how do we do this for this team? And I think it's about giving empathy for the other side of like the other parts and stakeholders, because they probably understand less about what your team is doing, why it matters, and mostly like what's in it for them. How does what you're doing help them achieve their goals and goals for the company than you think they do? To the point where I had a conversation this year with a longtime friend, VP of product. We've worked with this person before. And so I believe they know a lot about what my team is great at and does. And he was talking about challenges with go-to-market, and I'm like, oh my gosh, let me tell you about this thing my team did for another crew's go-to-market. And he looks at me so strangely, and he goes, Lacey, UXR isn't for go-to-market, it's for screens. excuse me while I pick my jaw up off the floor, right? Like, what? What do you mean? Like, you are losing the point. Of course it's for more than that. But this is somebody I thought for sure knew what we were about, how this work could be used, and how he could leverage it beyond a screen, and he didn't. And so I think it's our job to make sure, like anyone in this room, like how do we actually extend and learn and use our research skills internally to better understand other people and cross-functional teams, what their incentives are, what they're trying to win and do, and how they want to grow in the organization. And I tell you what, like at a human level, every single person wants to feel like they're seen, heard, understood. And so like going at it with that lens, like, oh, what can I help your team with? Like, how can I understand what your needs are and frame what you do, your discovery, your research, what have you, and how it's going to help them meet their goals? You're going to get so much further. They're going to remember that. They're not going to remember your methods or your deck or like some study you did, but they're going to remember, oh my gosh, this person can really help me get to the next level. But it takes time and it takes intentional energy to like reach out your arm to other departments, whether that's marketing, sales, what have you, to help them understand what your team does, but also so you understand theirs, because empathy is a two-way street.
Sounds like they could help my marriage too. Just kidding. Jess, what do you, given you've been in these large companies and you see them scale, like how have you seen or supported the explosion and adoption of discovery and sort of this mutual collaboration to help make better products?
Yeah, I think, when I first started at Slack in 2015, we were like a small company at the time comparatively. And, I think we had a program at the time, everyone does support. So, you spent at least an hour a week, everyone answering support tickets, and it really built this like deep. And then we scaled and we got rid of the program, and people start to lose, that sort of direct sense of customers. They go into their, area of expertise. They lose that connective tissue. And at Slack, actually, what happened is I think we felt like we were the power users, and so we ended up started building for ourselves and for the use cases that we really wanted, because we loved Slack and we wanted to see this feature so badly. And we had built something called the customer love sprint, that we were supposed to be fixing these like small things for customers. And somebody reminded us, this is the customer love sprint, not the you love sprint, not the internal Slack employee love sprint and what you want to see. I think that in terms of like as the organization scales and as a more formal research organization may spring up to really represent that voice of the customer and bring some of more of the methodology and the science to these processes, I think I totally agree with Lacey that the key is understanding their incentives, and the best researchers that I've ever worked with and best data scientists, and I really think the relationship between the two is more important than we give it credence, is opinionated people. Is people who read a spec and say, hey, actually, I'm not sure you thought about this, or they bring in prior research, or they say, is that really the right metric? They aren't just regurgitating what you say you want in a study. They're saying, like, actually, I understand the business goal deeply, or I understand this persona really, really well, and I'm not sure you're thinking about that the right way. I think like one of the best pieces of research I ever saw was somebody took all of our jobs to be done and gave us a letter grade, A through F, a researcher. And it was amazing. It was like, oh crap, we are a D on that. That's like, we have a failing grade here. But it was such a great way to set off a set of conversations of, oh, I actually disagree with you on this. Like, how might we think about this? And that piece of research alone sparked so many important roadmap conversations, because that person was willing to say, I'm going to use my expertise to guide what product is doing and what product is incentivized by. And so I find much less value when somebody's like, here's the thing you asked for, than when they say, hey, have you thought about it this way? And that's what I really, really look for in a partner.
So Patrick, you start off in research. How have you seen this kind of scale and work across orgs, or what would your recommendation be for the crowd?
I think a lot of what we're talking about right now is just customer centricity. It's like, how close are the people in your organization to the customer and their understanding of their pain points and needs and desires? And if they're not close, how do you help connect them to that? So the work that they're doing provides meaning and it matters. At the end of the day, it aligns to business goals, but also aligns to the customer goals. They're buying your product, they're putting trust in you for an objective, they're trying to achieve something, whether or not that helps them get promoted or whether or not that helps them get the next the outcome that they're trying to achieve. The one thing that I think about, right, is there's always these little things you can do to help improve that as an organization. I think if you were to try to swing the pendulum from an organization that doesn't model customer centricity to the far right of that extreme, you're going to fail. So it's like, how do you break it down into these little steps to overall improve it, and then show the value, make it public? And so, like, you know, the things that I've seen work really well at the organizations that I've done is just even watching session replay as a proxy of how customers are doing it. And if you ask an engineer, like, hey, how many session replays have you watched this week? It's really easy to be like, hey, like, what bug did you discover? And then be like, hey, like, do you feel like empowered to go solve that problem that you observed? Right? It's like still abstracted from the customer to some extent, but like getting them to think about like, hey, I can go observe that customer experience, and then like, hey, I actually want to talk to a customer. Like, can you introduce me to a customer that I can talk to? I want to find some more people. I want to know how they're using our product. And if you can foster that level of empathy and desire for your engineers, for your PMs, for your go-to-market team, for everyone to be like, hey, I actually care about the people that I'm solving problems for, you're going to have a much more successful organization, ultimately. And this isn't necessarily a conversation around research, but it's what does research provide, right? It provides you the key insights that you need in order to drive the business forward.
Yep. If you couldn't hear the seagulls back there, it's pretty amazing. Right behind us is Alcatraz, the bridge over there, but we're all in this beautiful theater and have no clue. So, okay, the buzzword du jour since I think it was November 2023 has been AI. And we obviously, Dovetail announced a bunch of AI stuff today. We've had AI product for the past year. But I'm curious, like, what's your guys' take on, and we can open it up. I don't need to go, each of you can, but what does AI do? Does it help expand it? Does it hurt? Like, you know, what's our take here? Who wants to go first? No one has an opinion. No one has an opinion on AI.
I have an opinion on AI. I think so. I'm building an AI product, so I spend a lot of time working with AI tools and just exploring what's out there. I think the thing that again folks think about is like, what do I want to do in my day to day? Like, I love talking to customers. Like, the reason that I start a company and do the things that I do is because I want to solve problems for them. And so I think when people are like, hey, AI is going to solve this, it's like, if you remove me or if you add barriers for me actually talking to somebody that I care about, that's a failure. Like, that's not what I want. Like, I want to talk to customers every day. I want to be on calls with them. I want to figure out how I can help them. And so when I think about AI and specifically usage within, you know, tools for user research or product management or engineering, it's like, I want you to do the things that I don't want to do, or I want to do the things that AI is better suited for. So in the context of research, it's synthesis and analysis. And I spent a lot of time previously at Amplitude, and it's like, AI is really good at spotting patterns, right? And this is traditional machine learning, whether or not it's like, find me some usage patterns that actually can then take to actually inform what I want to do on the product side. And don't remove me from the things that I like, which is talking to customers.
But the counter to that would be, what about AI helping the people who don't want to talk to customers or just aren't good at it, don't feel comfortable, bringing the customer to them?
To be clear, when I started my career, I was not good at talking to customers. Like, it's a learnable trait at the end of the day. And I would not be in the position where I was if I was like, hey, I want to actually use a tool here in this place. Like, I think the best growth ultimately comes through adversity and challenge, right? Like, if you're not good at something, it's like, I think it's actually helpful to be like, hey, how do I get better at the thing? Not, hey, I actually want to adopt a tool that makes me one level abstracted from this. Ultimately, I feel like the people that are most successful professionally are the ones that are in the room with the customer, ultimately. And so again, like, this would be my recommendation for anybody, is like, be in the room with the customer, because ultimately you're going to be the voice of the customer inside your organization.
I 100% agree, but that's my career path. So. Jess, you want to say something?
Yeah, one of the things I was just going to add is, like, I think AI, you know, you asked the question of, like, what is AI good at? I think in terms of research, where we've seen AI be extremely helpful is looking across a large data set, right? Not just one customer, but what do hundreds of customers think? Can we triangulate between data sources? That's been a huge lever for us to be able to find patterns as opposed opposed to, if you watch that one customer interview that you anchor on that point that they made. I think that AI, for us, has been so good at looking backward. What are the trends we did see? What are the problems we have seen in the past? Where we still need that real human layer of intervention and insight is looking forward. What could this look like? What trends do we think are just on the surface that are starting out, but we're not seeing them full bore in the data yet? And so I think we have to have that mix of saying, yes, we know these historical things. Often those are actually trending too late. We're like, yeah, duh, the roadmap already fixed a bunch of those things because the humans who saw them coming told us. Now we have a roadmap against it. So I think we have to be really thoughtful about whether we're looking back or forward, and we're doing product visioning and things like that. I think the other thing I would say, I lost my train of thought. What was I going to say? I don't know.
So
It's okay.
Oh, yeah.
It's okay.
I'll add to that. At Zoco, because we're in consulting, we have to constantly find efficiencies for what we're doing. So we're heavy adopters of AI, and we always have been. Sam said at a panel earlier this morning, she's like, yeah, I've been using big MLs for a very long time because, of course, we want to try and remove some of our bias, find the right patterns. And so I think there's tons of great applications, and certainly applications for giving cross-functional teams more access, making things easier, more connected. All of that said, these tools don't help you necessarily ask the right questions. They don't necessarily tell you where to dig, especially for those of you who are working in complicated, fragmented industries that have tons of different types of buyers, users, audiences that all intersect. Anyone in there, here, in a spot like that, right? In healthcare and in finance. And by the way, those are all the industries we work with, so we get it. If you think about hey, can AI solve all of our problems in the healthcare space? Oh, wouldn't we love that? It'd be all done, right? But it's just too messy to try and figure out. Behavior's not always linear. You might understand or see in your data, this thing happened at this moment in time. So what if we fix things in that moment? But it may have nothing to do with that moment of the journey, right? It might be coming from some other moment. It might be coming from a completely different audience, from a provider or a payer. It's just messier than that. And so it becomes really important for us as humans to better understand the whole system and understand all the different patterns and what's influencing each other. And I think it's going to be a while before these tools can unravel all of that without a lot of human assistance. Not that they can't make incredible efficiencies and remove some of our own bias, because we all have it. But again, just to reiterate the first point I made, I'm very optimistic about the role we're all going to continue to play, because things are being deployed faster than ever. It doesn't mean that they're solving all of the world's problems.
The only other thing I'd add to that, and I 100% agree for what it's worth, is that generally people are really bad at asking the right question and framing the question without introducing some level of bias. And I think the biggest way that I've always been able to try to suss that out is, are you trying to prove the hypothesis, or are you trying to disprove your hypothesis? And AI is really good because there is generally bias in whatever you do on the AI side today, but you can actually have it do the inverse of what you wanted to do as well, and actually be able to prove out the null hypothesis relatively easily. The one thing that I learned from spending a lot of time at Amplitude is that if you just build a system of record or even a system of engagement without that system of intelligence, you're not going to get a lot of use, right? So if you think about, I have an insights repository of all this data. If it's not actually helping generate the insights to actually get used by the business, it's not that valuable.
And yeah, to pick up on it, I think as a company, we're introducing AI to the research process, and one thing that we're believing is that AI can remove the tedious parts, but it cannot remove the hard parts. And what we mean by that is it's not a place to outsource our thinking and outsource the understanding of the data. So it's not like I dump my raw data in there and then I get a bunch of insights from there. This is not. It can totally replace the tedious parts. I've heard a super interesting quote. I remember it was somewhere there, but I don't know exactly where. I don't have to read through all of the transcripts. AI can help me find that, or AI can help me find related ones. But I think this is where it helps, and the dangerous part is when we outsource it and be like, do the thinking for me, do the understanding for me. So our approach with AI has been using it for scoped, limited tasks, and using it to help me understand, not make a decision for me in the end. This is sort of the analogy that we use in that regard. Okay,
so how do we think about we believe in discovery. I think some of us have a strong opinion about AI helping drive efficiency and doing the rote stuff that we don't really want to do, or that we think we can do faster. How do you build a culture, though, from the ground up that's incorporating discovery across the organization, right? I'm hearing a lot of like getting product management involved and maybe some of the broader structure, but I've only heard one person mention go-to-market and was actually in a negative light over here, Lacey. Her friend.
Oh, I love go-to-market. He
Yeah.
just was kind of ignorant.
He was ignorant. I would agree. That's an ignorant, especially given he's your friend and he knows. But like, how do you
tell him.
How do you actually bring this to the entire organization, right? And particularly, I think the thing that it really I'm curious about, especially in this context, is how do you take all these amazing customer conversations we're having on the go-to-market side and make them part of the research and discovery process and really up-level the entire organization? So I'd love to get your opinion on that, and also like examples of how people can do that, practically speaking, that are here, because I think that's going to up-level everyone's knowledge. It's true. Look, every company says they're customer-centric, but I think we've all worked in plenty of companies that are, we're customer-centric, but we're actually not really customer-centric, because a lot of the parts of the organization are not having conversations with customers, and they're not doing any of this type of hard work. So I'm curious, how do you build a discovery-driven culture, and how do you incorporate truly the entire organization and the parts that are actually having a lot of customer conversations? You want to start, Alex?
Yeah. I think as work in research, it's important to differentiate doing the research and doing the work around the research, like around the study, the actual conducting the study. And this is the second is super important. And I think in the future will become more and more important as we save time and become more productive with AI and other tools in that doing the research stuff. So what does this mean, like doing the work around the research? It means building visibility and creating visibility. I heard a tip recently from one researcher, and what she does is she looks at what the CEO of the organization is interested in and looks at what the CEO's sort of priorities are, which products he in this case was focusing on. She was trying to get in touch with the teams that are working on this stuff and seeing if she could support that with research. And it kind of made sense, because this is a way for research and discovery to get visibility and be like, hey, there's value there. Of course, you got to be careful. Ideally, you want to optimize and prioritize research for the overall impact of the organization, not what the CSO is working on, but in many cases this is aligned. So this is a great example, and other examples are like building the foundation. I talked about building the tooling, building the processes, building the templates, educating people. Again, the best organizations that we work with built education programs for discovery. They educated, I think, 400 people in the organization within like 2 or 3 years. And it's not like a huge education program, but it's like you have to read a book, you have to do like a training session, you have to join a researcher doing research, and all of these things that help actually scale, because doing the research, as important as it is, unfortunately doesn't scale this idea of discovery throughout the organization.
Got lots of thoughts on this.
This is a good one.
It's a good one. I like that you opened up with the fact that so many people talk about, we care about being close to our customer, it's the most important thing we do. And then if you actually peek the hood, get a peek under the hood of those companies, a lot of times they're not doing it, right? Like they're not meeting their own potential. In addition to being the CEO of Zoco, I also lead roundtables for product leaders all around the US. And one of the big things that I've learned from those is that's one part of what's keeping them up at night too, is like these folks know we're not as close to our customers as we want to be. I've been asking people to quantify, like on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you? Are you actually where you want to be in being close to your customer across the whole org, not just in your UXR department? And I think the average answer from last quarter was a 4, right? And so like, just let that settle. Like that's not a good number. And so I just want to have empathy first, that this is hard. And I'm probably talking to a lot of people in the room who are thinking like, yes, how do I get other people to care? Of course, I care. Of course, my department or my peers care. But how the heck do I get other people to care? And because we work with a lot of like regulated, fragmented, challenging sort of industries, I want to speak to all of those people in the audience because I saw a lot of hands. I think the first thing that you have to do is show, not tell. And I know that that is hard if you don't feel like you're empowered and you don't have the opportunity to do what you want to do or do the research. But just look for the small opportunity to say, you know, like I've been asked to do this design sprint, I've been asked to do this whatever. Is there a small way I can right-size research and do something so that I can mitigate some risk? I can benchmark where it was today before we have a new release. I can learn something that I can position to other folks within the company so they see and understand the value. Not just, oh, research is important, let's all evangelize. Don't do that. Like that will hurt your cause. But like show, not tell, the proof points that this is creating an impact. And to your point, Alex, like how can you tie that to something you already know that the company cares about? Like, is there something public the CEO stated? Do you have earnings calls? Are there all hands or board meetings? Like, what metrics is your company trying to prove and trying to move? And can you help show like why your work contributes to that? And so I would say show, not tell, right? You need to like just set the table. Don't wait for a seat. Like find your place and make sure that you own it. You need to prove your value and create an impact. And the last thing I would say is you have to ritualize it. Like people don't get used to like create new change from just hearing from you once. You have to do it over time. So we've seen companies be the most successful when they can tell these stories on repeat, right? Like, can you embed some of your outcomes and some of the things that your team is learning and improving upon? Can you put that in your monthly all hands? Can you put that in weekly stand-ups? Like whatever ritual works for you. But the first several times you do it, people might not care. They might not give you the attention. You might be frustrated as heck. Like, gosh, this stuff's important. Can you please listen to me? But on like time 4, 5, 7, like they're gonna start to say, oh, yeah, Lacey keeps coming back with like this stuff and it seems like these metrics are moving and I keep hearing about this team that they lead that's doing all these great things. Maybe I should care. Maybe I should invest in them more, involve them more, and the change will happen, but you all have more agency and are more empowered than you think you are. You just have to take ownership of that as much as possible, and I know it's challenging.
By the way, real quick, 7 times. Humans need to hear something 7 times before it sinks in. So the ritual thing, it has to be 7+ times. Jess? Patrick?
You asked the question of how do you create a customer-centric culture, and my hot take is you can't. That you either join a company that has a customer-centric culture or not. And there are gradations within that, but I think, as I've learned through my career as a product leader, this is something that is so important and core to who I am and what I want to be a part of. And it's something that was drilled into me at Slack, and it's why I chose Webflow, because I felt like I asked, how does the CEO spend their time? How do the e-staff spend their time? How do you deal with customer escalations? How do you, how often are you on site with customers? Because that was something that just felt really important to me, and I've been in cultures where it wasn't important, and I frankly didn't want to feel like I was fighting that uphill battle. And that's a personal decision. I do think that there are incremental things that you can do to increase the level of customer centricity in an organization. But I think it's really hard if that is not coming in the heartbeat of the company to change it. And so I think that Lacey and a couple of people have made this point about like connecting to the impact, connecting to the real things that matter, bringing it alive. I think one of the downfalls of, you asked about customer-centric culture, and I would really distinguish that from a research organization. And we have to tease those apart because as a product leader, one of the things for me is like you as a PM shouldn't need to rely on a researcher to know your customer. You should do it. And there's a lot of times where you shouldn't be doing research. You shouldn't run a survey. Because you should know. You should have spent enough time with this customer base that you can make a fast decision based on your intuition, and you don't need a capital R researcher to tell you it's right. And I think that the customer-centric culture is not just about the size or scope of or impact of even the research organization. It's about how does each person feel accountable to the person that they're serving and building for.
100% agree on that, for what it's worth. I think we talked a little bit about this backstage, but the number of people between the person who's building the product, typically the engineer, and the customer, the more people in there, the worse the outcome is going to be. And so research as a discipline definitely has a ton of value, but democratizing those tools so that engineers can ask great questions, engineers can get on calls with customers. And this is actually, Josh, how many customer calls do you have per week?
Me?
Yeah.
That's a great question. I think it varies, but I mean,
A dozen?
Yeah, I'd say
Yeah.
somewhere between, it depends on the week, but half dozen, dozen.
Yeah.
End
So
of
what's
quarter.
the average number of calls that a PM has with customers per week? Less or more?
Again, depends on the company. I think at our company, it's probably similar, actually, quite frankly, but I've been in organizations where it was 0.
We tracked it. We had a giant spreadsheet at my last company where we tracked the number, each PM, the number of weekly customer calls that they would do per week. I was on the top side of that. I was averaging 8 calls per week with customers. I'd say the average was closer to 3 to 4 customer calls per week as a PM. And so when I think about this and you think about the insight, my favorite meeting, for what it's worth, that was the most productive for me as a product leader was the monthly interlock with go-to-market. So it's PD go-to-market interlock, where go-to-market is actually communicating the insights and the research, and what they're hearing from the field was the best insight for me. Yes, like I want to talk to customers, but like there are other resources that typically most organizations have of insights that can feed back into the organization. And so when you talk about research, I think salespeople generally have the best salespeople run the best discovery process.
Yeah.
They're really good at understanding the customer needs, the pain points that they have, and how that aligns with the product that you have or doesn't, right? You don't want to chase a bad deal. So it's like, it's better to disqualify early on, feed that insight back into the product organization so that they can improve. And so this is where it's like, again, I come from a research and design to product management background, but I have more respect for go-to-market now than I have ever in my entire career, because I think generally they're the most customer-centric. Like, yes, they're tied to a metric, and yes, there's an outcome if they hit that metric, but they're the ones that really care about it.
I just want to respond to one thing about the metric of customer calls. So one that's a really interesting process. One thing coming from a B2B world and an enterprise background, I think one challenge I've seen with that type of thing is we start thinking a lot about the customer and less about the user.
Yeah.
And so there's a question of which are you focused on? You know, in my company on enterprise teams, you'll see tons of calls, right? Because they're sell calls. They're roadmap, they're painting a vision, and that's great, but it's not discovery. It's not learning. And so the question for me is, how do we encourage the organization to be also doing those learning calls? What are you on forums? Are you watching what's happening in social media? Are you going through survey data yourself? And so it's just an interesting and tricky balance.
Totally difference between discovery and pitching
Yeah.
as well. So if you're selling, then you're in a bad position, right? Because like your job is to understand like exactly what the pain points are, and then be like, hey, we can solve those pain points. And so it doesn't matter what solution I have if I can solve the pain point for the customer.
And I'd also distinguish, I don't know how many people in here are B2C versus B2B, but I think this is very much a B2B
For sure.
context. I think B2C, though, there's so many customer interactions, and using some of these tools help you get those interactions. You're not going to be primary on the call if you're a PM on most calls, but you can go and hear those interactions. You can go do the analysis and survey results, NPS, App Store reviews, whatever it may be. Okay, we're getting down to the last few minutes of the conversation, and actually this is probably one of the more important parts of the topic, which is how do you measure the impact of discovery and research and this customer centricity? I'm curious as to, one, your thought on how you measure it, and two, examples of how people can bring that back to the organizations and be successful. And I think, Alex, you probably have a lot of these interactions, and you're thinking about this a lot given what Condens does.
Yeah, totally. For me, having impact with research is the topic of 2025. There's so much pressure and need to show the impact. We actually have an online panel coming up next week with Condens and Nikki Anderson, who's well-versed in research about exactly that topic. One interesting aspect, it comes back to doing impactful work, like doing impactful studies, and working on that visibility thing. And I think this often is neglected or is not getting enough attention. Like, how do we show that? One interesting kind of trick I heard recently is that when you start working on a study, you get questions from stakeholders. One thing you can do is you ask them what their hypothesis is. Like, what do they think will the outcome be? And then remember to write that down and use that either while you're gathering the first insights or when you're presenting, and compare that to what you actually found out. So this is a nice way to, sometimes it may be the same thing, so you're confirming what you already know, but you increase certainty. And sometimes you're finding something that is completely different from what people thought. And this is usually the moments when people realize, oh wow, we just learned something. We would have gone in this direction, but we should have gone in this direction. So this is just like one small thing that helps to show like how research can make a difference and make an impact.
I would add to that we talk a lot on our team that the point of doing discovery, of learning, is actually not to get smarter, right? Like the point is typically to achieve some other sort of metric, often to make more money, right? Like that's oftentimes what we're trying to help our companies do. But if we don't understand how the business works, if we don't understand what are the key strategic objectives, and hopefully there's alignment on those, right? And like what is the company trying to achieve and what is the context that lives in, it's really hard then to know like how am I going to help through what I'm doing, use this discovery in order to achieve this end goal. And so I think it's all of our responsibility to increase our business acumen and better understand how the business works, how it's capitalized, how it makes money. And I know that's really challenging in some of our seats. And so we have to ask, again, for time with other stakeholders to try and learn more about the business to see what's public. But it makes a huge difference. We worked with a company last year who was in fintech. They asked us, I told this story at lunch for those of you who are sitting with me, but asked us to improve first-time user experience, which seems pretty straightforward, right? But we were asking them a ton of questions related to like, what is the end outcome? By what time you're trying to achieve? Actually, like, what are your goals this quarter, the rest of this year? We learned that they're a VC-backed company, that they were trying to raise their next round. And as we dug and got into more details, we were able to uncover, okay, like your current churn is terrible. Like you're losing customers left and right. And based on your funders, they're not going to release their next tranche of funding unless they move their weekly active user rate from this super shitty number to this other number within a very specific time frame, like by this date. That information is gold to my team, right? Because then we know, like, yeah, there's a million things we can do to improve first-time user experience, but like the ones that are going to take a long time, the ones that aren't going to move this metric quickly, the ones, put those on the back burner. Those aren't the ideas. And so I think like where we can be better business partners is if we understand like how the whole system works and how what we do has a huge impact. But it's up to us to ask the right questions to continue to learn those things. And once you do, you will be the most valuable partner within your whole business. But then we're able to tie and more directly connect what we're doing to things that executives like really care about and speak in the language that's normal and nascent for them.
Yeah. Patrick, Jess, either you have a comment on how to measure?
The only other thing that this kind of sparked for me was, are you doing research to minimize downside risk or maximize upside potential? And so I think a lot of the times when people are doing research, they're trying to be like, okay, I'm trying to avoid negatively impacting something, versus like, I actually am swinging for the fences. This is a bet, this might fail, but I'm trying to maximize the likelihood that this is successful. And it's okay if it fails, but I'm trying to increase the win rate of effectively that bet that I'm shipping. And so that's the other lens that I think is probably worth talking about for folks as well. And it goes back into like aligning to the business objectives. The one thing that I learned from shipping hundreds of experiments at Atlassian is most people's gut intuition is wrong, generally speaking. You might ask somebody like, hey, is experiment A or experiment B gonna win? And most of the time, I would say they were, by default, if I would go to an organization, they were likely like the wrong pick. Because a lot of things that actually move the needle significantly are things that are audacious, or things that aren't obvious to the organization. And that's where it's, if you're just trying to minimize risk, you're not gonna be able to swing for the fences and have those like oversized bets.
Okay.
I would just add that I'm very uninterested in measuring the impact of research, because I think that there's an art that the sort of domain of research brings that is sparking ideas and bringing new things to light. And so to try to put one sort of key measurement on it, I'm not so sure about that. I think, if I were to pick anything, and this is something we're working on a lot at Webflow, is how much is that research and insight understood and socialized? If a study falls in a forest and nobody hears it, did it even get studied? And I think that so often we create really, really high quality insights, and we really understand something, and then no one knows about it. And so I'd say if I had to pick a metric for our organization, which we don't do this, I would say how many people read and understood what you actually published.
Okay, awesome. Well, that was great work. I appreciate you guys all participating. Note, by the way, hashtag Inside Out 2025. You cannot create a customer-obsessed culture if it doesn't already exist. Your general hunch is going to be wrong. And what were the other hot takes? There were a couple others here, but make sure you tweet that. So,
Jeremy
on
says
that
get off
note,
the stage.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Never-ending insights with the Stellar Group. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And yes, Inside Out 25 is the hashtag.